Hey y'all, Miss Macy here with week 3 of our comedy unit. We are going to be looking at a variety of media today to refamiliarize ourselves with some terms like satire and fake news that we talked about last week, and take a look at some new things like parody and caricatures, political cartoons, those types of things, and see how they fit into this idea of humor and the purpose of humor and what we will be doing with it. So let's go ahead and jump right in. First up, we're going to take a moment to do a quick review of fake news versus satire. Fake news attempts to convince the reader that it is in fact real news. The website will look like a legitimate news source. It will have articles that sound official and real. There's nothing when you glance at the page that's going to make it look like it is a joke or satire or anything along those lines. The purpose of fake news is generally for misinformation, so they want you to not know what's actually going on. One of the fake news articles that got a lot of views and such during the Clinton versus Trump election had the title of FBI agent suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder-suicide. So this was found on a site called denverguardian.com, and the publisher was Justin Kohler. And what he says is the story is completely false. One of his writers literally made it up, start to finish. But it was shared on Facebook over 500,000 times. And they work because they fit into existing right-wing conspiracy theories in this case, but in any case, it fits into the news that people want to see. So because in this case, these people wanted to hear this news, all it took for them to believe it was for Kohler to write it. Satire, on the other hand, does not attempt to convince the reader that it is real news. The website will look like a legitimate site. The overall tone will still be humorous, though. So when you look at theonion.com, it does not, at first glance, come across as completely and totally a news site. And even the name, The Onion, is not something that anybody would normally think of as a reputable news site. So the purpose is to make the reader aware of important social political issues and then persuade the reader to think about the topic. And a good quote from last week from the little video we watched during our virtual class was when Scott Dikkers, the founder of The Onion, said, "If The Onion ever wrote a story that fooled people, that was an accident, and it was because they, the readers, didn't know better." So you have two different types of things that look a little bit like news and could be misread. One, the intent is to mislead you. The other one, the intent is to make you think. So on the fake news side, like I said, we had this Denver Guardian article. They styled their page to look very similar to what you would see if you looked on a newspaper's page. You have local news, national news, obituaries, horoscopes, contact information, about those types of things. So you see that right at the top of the page. You have the article title, a giant picture. It looks very visually much so like a newspaper article these days, now that we are looking at our media online. But specifically, that publisher says everything about this story was fictional. The town, the people, the sheriff, the FBI guy. And then our social media guys kind of go out and do a little dropping it throughout Trump groups and Trump forums, and boy, did it spread like wildfire. You know, this was fake. This was meant to misdirect people, keep them from having the proper information. They do it in part, in large part, significantly for profit as the publisher, because they make a lot of money from their fake news. But it is not real. It never happened. On the satire side, when you take a glance at satire, often you will see right up front that it is not real. You would not believe that a dog and a cat wrote these two articles. Why Not Work From Home Forever by a dog, and America Needs to Get Back to Work by a cat. What they did in this little snippet is basically take the two arguments that are happening right now in society about when we should reopen the economy and get everybody back to work, and they chose to satirize that using a dog for one side of that argument because dogs want to have their pack around all the time. And they're playing off of that stereotype of a dog. And they're also playing off on the stereotype of the aloof cat who wants America to get back to work, get these people out of my house. I want my independent alone time. It's enough. So you've got these two concepts playing off of each other for this satirical piece. They are not trying to present this as real news. It is meant to get people to think more about this topic of whether, when and whether, and what's appropriate in terms of reopening the economy. So moving on. The next concept is parody. And parody is an imitation of the style of a particular writer, genre, or artist with deliberate exaggeration for comedic effect. So one of the most well-known parody singers from my generation is Weird Al Yankovic. And he wrote and sang all kinds of songs that were just fun and funny. And that was the entirety of his purpose. And when he does his parodies, he will imitate both the artist who originally performed the song as well as some other topic. Interestingly enough, he happened to write a song called Germs, and it's a parody of a song called Terrible Lie by 9 Inch Nails. And we're going to take just a minute here and watch a little bit of it to see kind of how that plays out, what that looks like when you're playing with that artist's sound, that artist's song, and then adding other lyrics to it to express or joke about whatever you wanted to joke about at the time.
Now if I ever dare to go to sleep, that's when they start their sneak attack. In the morning I wake up in utter horror to find my teeth are covered with bacterial plaque. Get those parasitic creatures off my face, and there's more coming every day. I never said that they could camp out on my body. I wish they'd pack their tiny little bags and move away. They're all over me. They're inside of me. I can't get them off of me. I'm covered with. What do they want from me? What do they do to me? There's no escape for me. I'm covered with.
So from the beginning down to when he's rolling on the floor, this is very much what 9 Inch Nails feels like when they perform live. But he's also just joking around about germs and how they're all over him, and it's awful when he's asleep and they're in his mouth just hanging out with the plaque. So you've got these two opposing concepts, and what really does make parody work is you're taking something that is known and appreciated in one way, and you're pairing this really absurd concept with it. So singing about bacteria all of a sudden just makes it an effective video to joke around about whatever topic. And we're going to see with things like satire and parody that they don't exist in a vacuum. So sometimes you'll see actual, political messages show up in parody. It did not have that. There was no big thing happening in October of 1999. It just happened to be something that, he was performing at the time. Had he written it now, it would have different lyrics and would truly be probably a mix of parody and satire on, washing your hands or whatever the case may be. So next up, we have this idea of characterization versus caricature. And with characterization, you should be pretty familiar with this term. We talk about characterization, that direct and indirect characterization, when we look at characters in whatever we read, whether it's a novel or a short story or whatever the case may be. And characterization is that way that a writer reveals a character's personality. So that may include the way the character thinks and feels, how the character looks and acts, how the character interacts with others. A caricature, on the other hand, is a pictorial, written, and or acted representation of a person. So when you have a caricature of somebody, you are exaggerating the person's characteristics or traits for comedic effect. It's if you are looking at a drawn cartoon version of somebody, they take the features of a person's face and they'll exaggerate those features for comedic effect. And it may play off of stereotypes, like gamers or the class clown or mean girls or nerds, troublemakers, jocks, whatever the case may be. They're going to play off of some idea that is just a stereotype that is known or perceived to be true about whatever group. So taking a closer look at characterization and caricature, we're going to watch a few quick video clips. So first up, we're going to look at this one from Aladdin to talk a bit about characterization and how that plays out in this movie.
Stop, thief! I'll have your hands for a trophy, street rat. All this for a loaf of bread? Whoa! There he is! You won't get away so easy! You think that was easy? You two, over that way, and you follow me. We'll find him. Morning, ladies.
Getting into trouble a little early today, aren't we, Aladdin?
Trouble? No way. You're only in trouble if you get caught. Gotcha. I'm in trouble. This time. Perfect timing, Abu, as usual. Come on, let's get out of here. Gotta keep one jump ahead of the bread line, one swing ahead of the sword. I steal only what I can afford. That's everything. One jump ahead of the lawmen. That's all, and that's no joke. These guys don't appreciate I'm pro. Riff-raff, straight rat, scoundrel. Just a little snack, guys. I can take a hint, gotta face the facts. You're my only friend, Abu.
Oh, it's that Aladdin's hit the bottom. He's become a one-man rising crime.
I blame parents, except he hasn't got 'em.
Gotta eat to live, gotta steal to eat. Tell you all about it when I got the time.
So when we look at someone like Aladdin and how he's being introduced in this film, we hear all kinds of things. We know he's poor, we know he's stealing, and how he's being perceived by others shows you a lot about his character. So the law enforcement in his area clearly do not appreciate the fact that he stole the bread, and they chase him throughout the movie for those types of reasons. But if you look at how the other members of his society interact with him, they find him to be a perfectly, nice and normal, fun-loving kind of person, and they have very good feelings toward him. So he's not a bad person, like he says. He only steals what he can't afford, and in this case, since he needs to eat to live, he steals bread because he can't afford bread, and you have to eat. You have to eat. So you have that kind of dynamic playing out. So you see he is good-natured. You see he is, he's funny. He is a charming young man. You can see that when he interacts with the women. So looking over at Caricature, we're going to see some of these traits be exaggerated for comedic effect. And a lot of sketch comedy on shows like Saturday Night Live, they use caricatures to play up certain behaviors. There is an element of satire to it, but there's also, it's just a way of creating that larger than life personality that basically encompasses all of those traits and things that annoy you about a person or a situation or a behavior. And you can play that up in a caricature to make people laugh, or kind of even within satire to get people thinking about something in a different way.
The environment is turning to crap. If we don't do something soon, we're absolute toast. I'm actor Blake Volanti. I play Simon on the CW series Simon Slays. You don't know me, Melanie! But the truth is, I really, really care about the environment, and I'm gonna fix it before any other actor. I came down to the ocean to talk with Dr. Khan, one of the highest grossing doctors in the climate world. So, doctor, what is the ocean?
Okay, the ocean is the vast body of salt water that occupies 3/4 of our planet.
That's way too much.
No, that's actually fine. But the water levels are rising.
Because of how many fish there are.
No, the fish are actually dying.
They're drowning.
No, the problem is pollution. Pollution is causing the marine habitats to be destroyed and the water levels to rise.
Ugh. I'm starving. At that point, I thought I'd learned it all. But the doctor had something else to show me.
So this is coral. The warmth of the water has caused it to expel its algae, and now it's dead.
Whoa. This is my girlfriend. Her body's insane. But she thinks I drive too many red cars.
What?
Too many red. Sometimes I wish I could just fight climate change.
You can't.
No, I mean like actually fight it. Like... The environment was getting worse, and I had a hard out at 5:30, so we needed to act quick. So, doctors, what are we looking at here?
A bunch of your headshots.
Amazing. Which one do you prefer?
They all look the same.
Go yourself, man. Everybody was working hard to solve global warming, and suddenly I did it by myself. But first, I needed a new hat. Doctor, I figured it out.
Oh, God.
The fish are drowning.
Do you understand how serious this is? If we don't take decisive action against climate change right now, we're in serious trouble. Are you trying to make yourself cry?
I am crying.
No, you're not.
I'm really close. Keep the cameras rolling. Another environment defeated. I'm Blake Volanti. And remember, only you can sign the online petition to make me the next Spider-Man.
So when you're looking at a sketch like this, obviously SNL is trying to get you to think about an important topic. So issues affecting the climate, and this is part of a group of Earth Day sketches that they've done over the years. So they're trying to bring attention to these issues around Earth Day. So that's the satire aspect. But the caricature aspect is this lovely gentleman right here who reminds me of a Sylvester Stallone kind of character, who basically doesn't know very much of anything about whatever topic they're advocating for or about. And it's, in a way, satirizing a lot of these, having actors be the spokesperson or the face of whatever issue is out there. And it's bringing in those elements of him being just an idiot and self-absorbed and unable to really grasp the concepts at hand. So you're bringing in this caricature of this actor because for the most part, they're not like this. But by exaggerating those traits, you can make it very clear to your audience that this is not the desired way to go about this, and we really should be paying much more attention to our experts and not looking at our experts as the highest grossing expert. We need to be looking at, people who really truly know what they're talking about and bringing them to, the forefront in these discussions. The political cartoons tend to use a single panel. They will be cartoons, and they will typically include a powerful statement of some type that will reinforce whatever visual image they've created for you on the page. It is high comedy, and it's meant to appeal to a smaller population, and they're looking specifically at reaching people who are informed already about whatever issue they are talking about. So we're going to take a look at 2 of these to take a closer look at it. So with the comic strip, this is from Calvin and Hobbes. And Calvin and Hobbes is actually one of those interesting examples because on the whole, Calvin and Hobbes will look at philosophical issues because it's based on philosophers, Calvin and Hobbes. But in this particular set of panels, you have him in his little mischievous way looking at his friend, checking for whatever it is he's about to do, realizing whatever it was he was about to do is going horribly, horribly wrong because it's just not there. And then he's just totally frustrated by the end with, I knew I should have thrown that snowball sooner. So it's not a deep message here. You've got him, illustrated going through each part of his reactions as he contemplates doing whatever bad thing, realizes he can't do the bad thing, and then is disappointed that he can't do that throwing of a snowball. When you're looking at a comic strip or a cartoon, you're reading the visual clues on the page as much as you're reading the words. So you're looking for the expressions of the characters, any little marks that they may make above their head to show added exaggeration or frustration or anything along those lines. The thought bubble, having the bolded and italicized new, lets you know to put emphasis on that when you read it so that you can get all of the subtext of the comic strip itself and whatever joke or meaning they're trying to convey. Now, on the other side, you have a political cartoon. And back when President Trump was talking about reopening the country by Easter and lifting all of the sheltering in place guidelines, our political cartoonist for the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, our local paper, Mike Lukovich, created this cartoon in response where he has the coronavirus giving an address, noting that they'd like to see everything reopened by Easter. So his goal is to get you to think about this concept in a different way, in this case, from how much this would benefit the virus and how much the virus would have loved to have seen that happen. Now, as it played out, that didn't occur. He did not lift those restrictions by then. But what Lukovich was attempting to do was get you to think about that concept and that issue a little bit differently and more deeply so that you understood the gravity, perhaps, of what was being proposed. So that wraps up today's lesson. Stay safe and stay well, y'all. We'll talk to you soon.